little word association. If I were to say wildly popular fantasy TV show, you're gonna say Game of Thrones, followed by all your crazy theories about how this thing's finally gonna end. And if I were to say professional skateboarder, you're gonna say Tony Hawk, as with your parents and your grandparents, because the dude's been skating since like the Reagan administration. And if I were to say the Kings of Butt Rock, you're gonna break into a Nickelback classic and promptly clear the room. Look at this photograph. Everything I do it makes me laugh. I can't. Now, the interesting thing about Nickelback is nothing. But what is interesting are the paralleling stories between a particular German car and a singular Jamaican legend that, with the help of a war in Europe and the American airwaves and an Austrian named Max, came to sit on their own respective iron thrones of recognition with literally no opposition. And who could oppose them? Because when I say vintage convertible luxury car, you're going to say Mercedes SL. And when I say reggae, I mean, if you say anything but Bob Marley, just turn this off right now and sort of figure out where things went so wrong in your life. We'll be here when you get back. Some of the sights and sounds of World War II, where our story begins in earnest. Now, I'm definitely no Ken Burns, but I thought for certain that World War II had definitively taught America and the rest of the world about the dangers of, Nazis and the horrors of nuclear weapons. But after the sad summer of 2017, the only thing I can say for certain now about World War II is that it introduced Americans to a proper sports car. So we still got that. Because in all seriousness, when our boys weren't busy busting up Hitler's blitzkrieg, they glanced around and noticed that, hey, Europe's got some pretty sweet rides. Cars that were small and spry and built for the tight, curvy European roads far more than for outright speed or opulence. And cars with names that still ring pretty familiar today, like BMW and Alfa Romeo, and perhaps most common to the guys that were stationed in England at the time, Morse garages. The hell's Morse garage?
MG only. The MG.
MG. So after they finally came home after being in England and the rest of Europe for so long, these soldiers had a longing for the small, open-top, performance-focused cars that they had seen overseas and were ready to put their money down on one. There was just one problem. America didn't really make one. And no one noticed that faster than a particular Austrian living in New York named Max Hoffman. But let's put a pin in that just for a second. Because not every soldier fighting the Nazis was doing it on European soil. Some of them found themselves in the apparent paradise of the Caribbean islands. Paradise, save for the fact that Hitler had the place surrounded by submarines sent there to sink oil shipments from Venezuela. That's just the short story. Again, I'm no Ken Burns. But after our boys busted up Hitler's U-boat brigade and the war was over, they too came home. But unlike when our soldiers came home from Europe, where they had this longing to bring back some of the great European sports cars they saw, it was what the soldiers left in the Caribbean that changed everything there and finally moves this story along. And this is what they left. Well, no, not a 1980s digital clock radio per se, but this. Because after World War II, it was the American airwaves that were now being broadcast and picked up across the Caribbean islands, playing American music. American music whose rhythm and instrumentation were quickly being melded into the native calypso of the islands and taking it to some very interesting places. And while over the course of the next 20 years there'd be stops at genres like rock, steady, and ska, it was reggae It was the final form of this great confluence of American rock and roll and calypso. And Bob Marley was its great deliverer onto the world. Now no, before we go any further, I am not saying that Bob Marley invented reggae music. There actually is no real record to trace back to who did. What there is, though, is a recording from 1968 titled, aptly enough, Do the Reggae, by a band called Toots and the Maytals, that is generally regarded as the first song to not only use the word reggae, but to really lay out the musical blueprint we've all come to know of reggae music. The drum fill intro, the guitar chops on the 2 and the 4. And that bass line that sits just right in the pocket. Nearly everything reggae music was to become was right there in one song. Nearly everything. For the one thing missing, we got to go back to where it started. To calypso.
How does reggae and ska come out of calypso? Many people ask that.
Yeah, because the calypso was always there first. Right, you know?
Now, even if calypso or its close cousin Jamaican mento music doesn't ring a bell, I can guarantee you've heard it even if you don't know it by name. But because we live under hipster law here in Austin, I can only give you an example of calypso on the ukulele. So, take it away. Day-o, day-o, daylight come and me one go home. Now obviously, that's Day-o, aka the Banana Boat song, aka the Beetlejuice song, aka the most famous calypso song of all time. And we've all heard it. And no, this is not a joke, because when you look at the lyrics of that song, you realize that what they represent became a huge influence on reggae music. Seriously, let's look. Day-o, day-o, daylight come, and me want to go home. This guy's been working his ass off stacking bananas on a boat all night, and he's ready to clock the hell out and go home. He reiterates, come Mr. Tallyman, come tally these damn bananas so I can GTF out of here and get some sleep. He's singing about the struggle, his struggle, the struggle of his job, which here involves stacking bananas 8 feet high on a boat throughout the night, whilst also trying to not get bitten by one of the most venomous spiders in the world. While on Do the Reggae, Toots is basically singing about dancing. Dancing. He's basically singing Do the Macarena while introducing the world to reggae music. But there was no struggle there.
But it's in the seemingly playful lyrics of the Banana Boat song that you see the enduring contribution of calypso to reggae, and to Bob Marley especially, in putting that struggle, be it personal or the struggle of your entire people, into the music, but sort of disguising it under a beautiful melody and danceable beat. And Bob Marley came to put that struggle to music better than anyone before or since.
Someone who wasn't struggling with life at the time was Max Hoffman, an Austrian-born European car importer in 1950s New York. Now Max had his ear to the ground, his head in the clouds, and his eyes on the future. Because what he nearly single-handedly did was only introduce and proliferate the European sports car in America as we know it today. Now no, in the same way that Bob Marley didn't invent reggae music, Max Hoffman didn't expressly design or build a sports car. But he knew someone who could. And with the unprecedented pull and respect that he had in the automotive world at the time, he got 4 of Europe's biggest car manufacturers to do just that. Build the car he saw in his head specifically for the American market. Now, how the hell did he pull that off? Well, all that longing for European sports cars that American soldiers had when they got back to the States, it was Max who was there to hear their cries, wipe away their tears, and then get BMW on the phone and say, hey, you want to sell 5,000 cars over here? Put a V8 in the sexiest open-top performance car you can come up with and ship them over. I'll have you guys swimming in more Deutschmarks and whatever you call Scrooge McDuck over there. And just like that, the BMW 507 was born. And was a commercial flop. But not because it wasn't one of the most beautiful cars ever conceived, because obviously it is. And not because Hoffman wasn't onto something, because obviously he was. It was because BMW gave Max a $10,000 car when he asked for a $5,000 one. And while America was doing well at the time, it wasn't doing that damn well. But the precedent was there. Hoffman knew the American market if these companies would just listen. So when Max went to Porsche and said, hey, you guys should make a 356 Speedster, he heard nothing but jawohl. And while Dustin Hoffman might have helped make the Alfa Romeo Spider as popular as it became in America, it was Max Hoffman who went to Alfa Romeo in the first place and got him to make it. And this, the car we are actually here for, the Mercedes SL. Now, the first generation of Mercedes seminal Sportlicht came out in 1954, born of Max Hoffman's direct recommendation to Mercedes that they needed a luxury performance coupe in the American market, stat. Now imagine that. No focus groups, no years and years of market studies, just one guy going to one of the biggest car manufacturers in Europe saying, here's my idea, you build it, I'll sell it, and I guarantee you it'll be a hit. And here again, the guy was right. And when the 190 SL convertible was released in 1955, it solidified that, on the hunch of a market-savvy Austrian living in New York, Mercedes had successfully birthed an entirely new model, an entirely new concept, frankly, the performance luxury convertible. Now, certainly there were convertibles before the SL, and certainly there were sports cars as well. And luxury cars, well, take your pick. Cadillac, Bentley, Rolls. But nothing had taken all 3 of those elements and put them together the way that Mercedes had. I mean, this car was not a behemoth like a Rolls, but it was still incredibly appointed. And you could park this next to a Rolls in Beverly Hills and have nothing to be ashamed of. The difference was, you could drive this up the PCH and not understeer yourself off a cliff. And as the model continued through the 60s and early 70s, it solidified itself as the de facto standard luxury sports convertible. And I know what you're thinking. Firstly, what the hell is going on with my hair, right? I know, I'm sorry. But secondly, that this SL looks nothing like the SLs I just showed you. And, well, good eye. But there's reasons for that. First of which is that those SLs are like $100,000, and I make these videos for less than it takes to eat a Taco Bell. But secondly, I didn't want those other SLs anyway. This is the one I wanted, the R107. Because this is the model that, frankly, took America by storm and made the car what it is today. This is the model that, like a suburban dad's taste in music, went unchanged for years and years and years. So it's the one that we think of when we think of Mercedes SL. And this model right here, this one I'm in, is especially special because it's a 1984 500 SL.
And that's important. But to understand why that means anything, or how I will seemingly, somehow, tie it into Bob Marley, I'm going to have to put America on blast real quick.
Here's a list for you. Justin Bieber, Cardi B, Post Malone, and Bob Marley. 3 out of those 4 artists have had a #1 hit in this country. And who's the odd man out? Well, guess what? It ain't this idiot. That's right, America. We found that these and many, many other jackasses are far more deserving of a spot at the top of the charts than old Bob Marley. Because Mr. Marley, in spite of everything he did for reggae, in spite of his great message, in spite of his immeasurable influence, never had a #1 song in this country. Not one. That means we gave no love to One Love, gave 3 little birds 1 bird, and said, no, we will not stir it up. We shake in this country, or at best twist. Now granted, Bob Marley's contribution to the world is far greater than just a measure of his chart positions, for sure. But Robert Nesta Marley, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, could not buy a hit in this country. And that's on us. We might not have the best history of recognizing true greatness. Not till it's too late, at least. In the mid-70s, for example, when Marley released one of his most beloved songs. A song that Rolling Stone would later call the 37th greatest song written of all time. A song that now, if you drip patchouli oil over a campfire, a white guy with dreads and an acoustic guitar will pop out like a genie and play it for you. A song with one of the greatest mantras in all of music, or hell, life. Is a song that largely went ignored when it was released and didn't chart at all. And that song that America didn't think twice about in 1975? You'd recognize in about 4 notes now. See, the problem was, 1970s America liked their music loud and heavy and with a little too much makeup. I'm not participating in this. For you, Dad. Okay, that's gotta be enough. So with 1970s America being mostly caught up in the nascent stages of hard rock and, well, this crap, and without a #1 hit, hell, without a top 20 song, how did Bob Marley, a singer from a tiny island in the Caribbean, become Bob Marley? The musical, spiritual, herbological prophet that transcended reggae, became the face of an entire religion, and came to define dorm room poster and bumper sticker wisdom for millions of people born well after Marley played his last note. How did America finally get woke to the legend of Bob Marley? Well, with this. For starters, sorry, that's so redundant. But this was his first true greatest hits record, released in 1984. Now remember that. Now, in today's digital age, greatest hits albums really don't make a lot of sense, because you can go in and download any artist's songs a la carte and make any playlist you want. But in 1984, 3 years after he died and well over a decade after turning to reggae, the buying public was given the fastest, easiest, most clear and concise window into what Bob Marley was all about, on one record. And that America could get behind, to the tune of 15 million copies and counting. You know who hasn't sold 15 million records in this country? Justin Bieber, Cardi B, and this idiot combined. Turns out that all America really needed, because it's filled with Americans, was a nice, easy way to see what they had been missing. And this record is as good a collection of any artist's music as anything released by anyone before or since. It not only explains who Bob Marley was and what he represented, but is a calling, like all greatest hits records should be, for the listener to dig deeper and buy the albums that the respective songs came from, so that they can pull back the lens and get the whole picture. This is that record. Now, hipsters might tell you that they got into Marley from an old vinyl copy of Catch a Fire that they found at the thrift store. They didn't. They're lying. They found a copy of this in their parents' CD collection and were Googling how to grow white guy dreads the very next day. Looking back, it seems like reggae came to this country as a foreign music that we had to slowly learn and understand to embrace. We had to have it delivered by familiar faces to get acquainted with it. And it took time. But after its release in 1984, this record became a syllabus to a class that nearly everybody in this country has now taken. And you probably know where this is headed. That legend wasn't the only greatest hits delivered upon America in 1984, as so too was this, the 500 SL. Now, if you've stuck around with me this long, I appreciate it, and I promise I'll try to be quick. By 1984, the R107 SL had been in America for 12 years. And as popular as it was actually only as much SL as the American laws allowed it to be, which meant big ugly bumpers, ugly headlights, and a soggy emissions-choked motor. Now, even if your average American didn't recognize the greatness of Bob Marley in a timely manner, they knew almost immediately that the American SL wasn't as good as it probably could be. And that theory was proven true when savvy American dealers started importing this into the country, the European big boy, the 240 horsepower 500 SL, with its sleeker body, better looking front end, and considerably more powerful engine, unburdened with emissions considerations. Look at it as a greatest hits, if you will, of all things SL that was foreign and forbidden on American soil. And like Legend, this greatest hits sold a shit ton too. Too damn much, frankly, as sales of this and other gray market Mercedes were so strong in the mid-1980s that Mercedes lobbied the American government to change the import laws and basically stopped them dead for years to come. When they start changing laws on your ass, that's when you know you've had too much of a good thing. So there you go, the intertwining stories of a legend that, while he died too soon and was appreciated a little too late, ultimately became rightfully entrenched in any conversation of world icons and musical geniuses, in a car born of one man's desire to bring a little bit of European flair to a post-war America that desperately needed it. And here's a little tidbit to tie this all up with a bow. While Bob Marley was certainly never one to fall into the trappings of the fame that he did achieve while alive, there was at least one thing out there that he did have one love for and splurged on: his Mercedes 500 SL, the last car he bought before he died.